Tracy Moreau, and I have the opportunity to introduce you to these fabulous new brushes from Dynasty. These are New York Sable. They are a true sable brush, which means they are slightly shorter and slightly smaller than a traditional bristle brush. These are beautiful, gorgeous wooden handle, nickel-plated, double crimped ferrule, and this absolutely sensational natural sable. Very comfortable to work with. Beautiful results, nice smooth finishes with these brushes. We're going to paint the girl with the pearl earring. We're going to take you through the whole process to show you how to work with these beautiful new brushes. For this piece, we are using a number 10 filbert, a number 16 round, and a number 16 flat. So in order to get started on this piece, you have to prepare your surface, and all I've done for this is applied 2 coats of a good quality acrylic gesso to the canvas. I did this in a slip slap fashion, so I kept all the brush marks so that it had a little bit of background texture back here, just for interest's sake. And then I transferred this line drawing to the surface using a graphite paper. And then once I'd done that, I just cleaned up the line drawing a little bit and added a few more finer details with a graphite pencil. So from this point, we are ready to start painting. These are an absolutely fabulous brush for oils. This is a natural hair. This is a true sable. They are beautifully soft, but just stiff enough to easily move these oils very beautifully. So in here for this piece, what I've done is I've used a little bit of burnt umber and a little yellow ochre to add all of my dark shaded values. So all of those really dark areas of the painting, I've put in this base. Gives me a good substrate, so when I'm putting blacks and other shading colors over top of it, I don't have to work so hard to get the values. So I've mixed up a really nice flesh tone, and I'm using this oval point. This brush has got a beautiful chisel edge, so it allows me to pull color in accurately, so I can get these really great crisp lines around these details. It lays color in very nicely and allows you to distribute it evenly in the space that you're painting. Now these water miscible oils are a little bit different. I can clean this brush using just a little bit of soap and water. And I'm using a small amount of linseed just to thin the paint out a little bit, but there's minimal odor. Absolutely beautiful. So I want to pull a nice little highlight under this eye right about here. So I'm going to put a little color in, and I'm just patting it in using this filbert. Gives you a nice texture and lays the color out nicely. I'm going to come back in and pick up a small amount of white. And we're going to build a little structure in this face by pulling in a little of that white. These are a nicely balanced, long-handled brush. They have a lovely grip. They're very comfortable to work with, especially if you're working on for a very long time. And some of these portrait pieces can take days to paint, so you need something that's going to give you lots of comfort. Now I have to mix a little more color for this cheek. So I've pulled a little bit of the titanium white, tiny amount of this yellow ochre. It's going to give me sort of a muddy yellow color. And then I'm going to pull just a touch of alizarin crimson into this. This will change our value to a little bit of an orange color, but it still might be a tad too bright. So a tiny amount of burnt umber will flatten that out for us a little bit and give us that lovely flesh tone. So now I'm pulling that color up into that shadow that I've already established in here. And my shadow is primarily burnt umber, but I've added a little of the yellow ochre just to give it a little more transparency. I didn't want it to be too dark. So I'm going to pick up a little of that burnt umber again, and I'm going to start blending these colors together. wonderfully soft. So I'm pulling a little bit, thinned out a little of that burnt umber because I wasn't quite getting the blend that I wanted in here. In order to get that softness, that nice, smooth, and soft transition of color without getting large bands anywhere, you need a really soft brush. So I'm not pounding on this canvas, but look, I can take that pinch. I just pinch cleaned this brush just to pull any excess paint out. And then I can take that soft, soft sable and very easily blend and meld these colors together. A synthetic has a tendency to cut into the paint a little too hard. The bristle is just a little too stiff. Having this wonderful natural sable gives you that great softness so that you get a smooth transition of color from one value to the next. And I'm just using a pat blend. I'm not using heavy strokes for this. I'm just very gently touching the surface of the canvas. And that's what gives us that great soft transition of color. These brushes are absolutely beautifully made. They have a nickel-plated ferrule, utterly seamless, a double crimp. The brush itself has got a very generous belly, so it holds a lot of paint and a lot of medium. And because it's so soft, you don't have to work very hard to get this great transition in color. So what is the girl with a pearl earring without a pearl earring? I'm going to pull a little of this titanium white in here just to give us a base. And I want you to see what that clean, crisp edge on this oval will give you. When I pull the paint around, it gives me a nice clean edge. It provides definition and great contrast. So I've got that nice white in that shadow. And I'll just pat blend this color out a little. Now pinch clean the brush and I'll come back in. I've pulled a little bit of the ultramarine blue in here. It's going to be subtle in the end, but you do need to have a little bit. I'm putting this blue right at the edge of that shadow, right here. And I'll pinch blend it again with a little bit of that white. And then I come back to my flesh tone that I already have mixed. And I'm going to pull a little of that flesh tone into the pearl. It gives that pearl that warm tone with just a little of that flesh color. Now I get to build up some more of that value in here so that I get lots of deep dark. Now this cheekbone in here needs some definition, but I'm going to take a little more of that burnt umber and pull it into my flesh tone. And then I'm going to start walking this color out a little bit. And starts to shape that cheekbone a bit more. Just provides it with a little more definition. So I'm coming into this neckline with this flesh tone that I've got here. And it needs to be just a touch darker than what was above it. We have a shadow in here. And we're going to build this depth in here very quickly and very easily. When you have a great quality brush to work with, it makes this so much simpler. Brush mixing with a natural hair. It's very easy to see your colors clearly on the brush. And very easy to brush mix. So I finished blocking in the face, and essentially all I've done is just get the skin tone in. I've added a few highlights that are just going to build the structure of the face. I've done the same thing with the mouth and in the chin and the neckline, just to establish a little dimension. I'm going to start adding some of the other color to this now, and I'm going to go up in here on this headband. And I'm just going to block this color in a little. I'm going to have plenty of variation in this one simply because I'm brush mixing, so it's not an utterly uniform color. Now I work this color directly over that shaded area. You see where I've got that original burnt umber in there. I'm working right over it. I can see it through the paint, so it's not a big deal. Now I'm working this brush up on its chisel edge because I want sort of a clean line here near the face. I love how easily this paint moves with these brushes. Now I have multiple layers of color going in on this here shortly, so I'm not really looking for a perfectly uniform application. I just want to get this color placement. And this blue really wakes up all of the reds in her face, so now all of these flesh tones are taking on a much warmer tone with this cold color next to it. These flats are great for precision lines, to get good placement with nice clean edges. You need a brush with a nice clean edge. Now I can start pulling. I have a little bit of the lamp black on this brush, and I'm using the chisel edge of that brush, and I picked up a little bit of the lamp black along with a little of that Prussian blue, just to pull in and start creating some of those gray values in the folds in that fabric. And having that little bit of black gives you the darker value that you're looking for. So now I've got placement for those little folds and creases in the fabric. Now I'm going to pinch clean this brush and pick up the black and start deepening this shadow in here. Now I'm only using a small amount of the black, and I'm just softly blending those colors together, which is also activating some of that burnt umber. It's keeping this black from getting too cold. If I take a little of the thinner or little linseed in here, I can create sort of a transparency with that black. And this is where that soft sable comes in handy, taking those thin glazes of color and pulling them out. Now for all of those little details around the mouth and the face, I like using these great little rounds in this line. And the reason being is that I've got a great point on these sable brushes. So when you get a little of the linseed oil or a little thinner in it, and then mix it with your paint. So for all of those little tight details, like in these lips, under the nose, this is where you need a little tighter control. And so you need something with a little bit of a point to pull that color in. And there's some pretty delicate shadows in these areas around the mouth. So having something with a finer point, like you do with this round, gives you a bit more control. And because it's sable, it's soft enough that I can open that brush up and just pat blend those shadows to give them a softer edge. I'm going to do the same thing with the upper lip with a small amount of that burnt umber right along this line right here. This will help give that upper lip a little more shape. Now, wherever you have a shadow, you have to have a highlight. So I'm going to pull a little bit of that titanium white to the other side of the lip and repeat the process and just pat blend that color out a little. Now that lower lip relies on the highlight to give it its luscious look. So I'm just going to pat that little highlight in right there and then soften it. That's just the edge of that clean brush. I want to give this lower lip a little bit more dimension. So I'm going to use, this is just a little primary magenta, and I've thinned it just a little bit with a little linseed. And I pinch clean the brush, and then just give it a little pat blend like that. Gives that lower lip a little more plumpness. And then you come back in with a little of that white to brighten that highlight. Gives that lower lip a nice luscious look. So from this point, I'm going to continue adding highlights up here into this headband. And as I add base color into this other portion of the headpiece and add highlights to that, it'll give me an opportunity to balance all of those highlights throughout the face and down into the rest of the portrait. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. Check out our Dynasty brushes. I think you'll be very pleased and very impressed with the quality made right here in the USA.